to the cloud. Awesome. Welcome everyone. My name is Gabby Albano. If you haven't met me yet, I'm the Venture Portland events assistant. And today I'm going to be talking about a very important topic of inclusivity in events. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and get it full screen. Can I get a thumbs up that, oh, already everybody can see it, but I'm having like a formatting issue. Let's try this again. I work very hard on my design, so I'm gonna try to get it to cooperate. So as I mentioned, this is the Inclusive Events webinar. More than just a buzzword. I think that inclusivity, along with a lot of other words, have been thrown around a lot in the last couple of years. And so today my goal is to try to break down what it means to be inclusive and have you take away some really immediate actions and tangible actions that can make your next event even more inclusive. So today, I will be discussing what is inclusivity and how inclusive our events currently get us a baseline for understanding the climate in the event industry. We'll also talk about implicit bias. Many of you might have already heard about this, but I'm going to talk about it in regards to events and how implicit bias affects events. And then finally, I'll be sharing some inclusive practices that you can implement immediately and share some resources with you all so that you can walk away feeling empowered. So let's go here. But before we begin, I have a challenge for you all. I would like you to try to match the word on the left-hand side with the proper definition on the right-hand side. So let's give you all about a minute to read through each of these and see how familiar you are with definitions. Okay, I see people thinking and reading. Maybe we all feel very confident. About 30 more seconds. Okay. So before I reveal the answers, I just want to point out how interrelated all of these concepts are, from equity, inclusivity, diversity, and accessibility. All of these words are very hot in the zeitgeist right now. We're all thinking about them, hearing about them, but breaking them down can be very helpful for when we talk about problem solving and solutions. So, drum roll, here are the answers. Accessibility is the quality of being easy to obtain or use. Inclusivity is the practice or policy of providing equal access to people who might otherwise be excluded. Equity is the quality of being fair and impartial. And then diversity is the practice or quality of including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds. So sometimes it's good to kind of break down what each of these means, and obviously they can all affect one another. So today we will be discussing inclusivity. So with that definition, I think it's important to, before we even talk about making events more inclusive, that we consider some of these questions. Who has previously been excluded from event planning and attending events? Why have they been previously excluded, and what barriers still prevent equal access? So inclusivity is not just an afterthought. There's a lot of systemic things that keep people from being able to participate in event planning and going to events, even though in the last couple of years we have been making great strides to address some of these barriers. It still has a long way to go. But how long exactly? Like what's the current situation in the event industry? Well, thanks to a recent study done in 2020 with about 600 participants who filled out the survey, within the event industry, the research found that the sector predominantly consisted of white professionals, 82%, with just 3% of event professionals identifying as Black, African, or Caribbean. And because I think that pictures kind of speak volumes compared to stats, here is a great graph that shows what 82% really looks like. As you can see, you know, we still have a lot of a way to go to diversifying who makes up the event industry, but it is pretty jarring to see how large of the circle that center part is. Oh. So here's our next stat. According to the same study, despite the industry consisting mainly of women, the research participants indicated that 46% of male event professionals hold executive roles compared to just 23% of women. And this doesn't even necessarily include people who identify as non-binary or trans. So with these two genders, we can look at the ratio. Now this graphic is very light, so I apologize if you can't quite see the two lines, but this last one down here at the bottom, executives, 46.43% are men versus that 22% that are women. And as you can see, all the tiers below show that it's a little bit more equal, maybe even leaning more women in lower management. So still have a ways to go when it comes to diversifying our leadership. And then lastly, I think it's important to note that there's also a lack of representation from those with disabilities working in events, with only 3% identifying as having a disability. So this can be any type of physical or mental disability that would be in the event industry. So this is the current climate of events in 2020. Let's hope that by 2022, end of 2022, we've made improvements along the way. Was anybody shocked by those statistics, or are we all kind of feeling aware? I'm seeing a lot of head shaking, like, nope, we are very aware that this is the climate. So I felt similarly working in this sphere so far. So I'd like to break down inclusivity with regards to events into 3 categories. Obviously, you can continue to think through inclusivity in more than 3 ways, but this helps me understand the full picture of an event rather than just one area. So when it comes to your event staff and supplies, procuring staff and supplies is huge to being inclusive. We all know how easy it is to get things from Amazon. And yet we also know that there are potentially more local, more diverse folks that would be happy to give you, decorations and tables. They could work security. They can be the event support system. But if we aren't thinking through how to be inclusive, often that gets pushed. Depending on how much time you have, you basically push that off, and then you have to go with what's easiest, which is often what's already more well-known. So basically events provide jobs and opportunities and partnerships. These are valuable positions that can help build a more diverse and inclusive community bigger than just your event. So thinking through who do you hire, who do you support when acquiring supplies is actually essential to creating sustainable inclusive practices and building long-term relationships rather than just these quick acquiring supplies moments on Amazon. Not to dump on Amazon, but leadership roles would be the second category. So we saw that, there wasn't a great deal of diversity when it came to executive positions, or there could be room for improvement. And without representation within leadership roles, certain voices may be excluded and often are. That means that an inclusive approach to leadership requires more collaboration. You have to have more people at the table in order to be mindful of what things are being excluded. Again, this is a learning process. There's never going to be a time where you are the most inclusive, but having people in charge that are diverse and represent a larger sphere of identities is going to be essential for decision making. So the final question is, who gets a seat at the table and who gets access to the decision making power? Last but not least, the attendees. How inclusive do we want to be towards attendees? And this is a little bit different because, of course, the scope and type of event you're throwing may have exclusionary pieces. It may be something that is to raise money and has a cost to it. That said, events are spaces where many different kinds of people can interact. This is different than your home or your work environment. It's kind of a third-party space where we can build connections and grow and understand each other. So thinking about events as these almost sacred spaces where people can come together may change how you plan your event and who you want to invite. And the attendees often reflect who feels safe and welcomed at the event. So the question is, who isn't there and why aren't they represented? I think if you break down events into these three categories along the way, you can start to build inclusive practices at every step and just constantly question why we make certain decisions and not leave things for afterthoughts. Okay, I have a case study. So this event is actually happening today. And if you don't have plans, this is a Pride event happening at the Nest bar in the Belmont district. Hatched is a bi-monthly local drag show. And one thing that I want us to do is take a second to look at the ways that this event is trying to be more inclusive, and then also think about, are groups being excluded? So let's take a second to look at the flyer and kind of think through, who do we see represented, or what are ways that they have, what are things that they've done to be more inclusive? Okay. No cover, ASL interpreting, everybody's already kind of seeing some good stuff. Great. So as the chat has mentioned, there is no cost, and the no cost element is huge. Obviously, if there is a financial barrier, that's going to not allow certain low income individuals from participating. Again, similarly, ASL interpretation is available. So they use fingers crossed interpreting, which is a resource I'll share later. But ASL interpreting is one of the staples actually here in Portland for the drag community. I often see a lot of performances in tandem with ASL interpreters. So shout out to that community for prioritizing hard of hearing and deaf folks as well. And then I think that LGBTQ representation is all over this page, you know, with rainbow colors, and just inviting that type of folks and people who identify within that community. And then the last thing that Mackenzie mentioned, yes, is the vaccination requirement. So the vaccination requirement is, again, a practice that is both inclusive and exclusive, depending on which community you're talking about. For immunocompromised and disabled folks, having a vaccine requirement is huge for how they feel safe and navigating COVID risks. So having that as a staple of your event can be more inclusive to disability communities, but it does mean that there is exclusionary practices. People who aren't vaccinated can't attend, and that is something to always be thinking about. Similarly, the flyer is only in English. So there's, you know, the question of, if somebody doesn't speak English, do they have space there? Would this be something fun that they can participate in? You could even remark that not all ages. That's a great, I didn't think about that one. Thank you, Annette. So right, this is at a bar. So it's 21 plus. And if you're somebody who's wrestling with sobriety or trying to work through substance abuse, this wouldn't be a necessarily ideal space. And all of these things are just a case study of one specific event. So many different ways people can feel included or excluded just from a flyer. So thank you for taking a second just to look at this, and maybe some of you will attend the drag show tonight. But let's move into our next conversation point, implicit bias. Can I just take a temperature read if you want to raise your hand or use your hand react if you have heard about implicit bias or done something before that addresses it? I see a couple. Yes, yes. So quite a few. It seems like quite a few of us have at least heard about implicit bias or have done something to educate ourselves around it. Well, I'm going to, let's see. If I escape from this screen and pop over here, can we all see my YouTube channel video? I'm seeing nods, great. So we're gonna take a second, 2 minutes or so to watch this video, and then we're gonna have a bit of a discussion about it because I do think that implicit bias is essential for any type of inclusion practices. So without further ado, let's take a gander. Can we all hear it? No? We can't hear it. Okay, wait. This is the part of technology that intimidates me. So maybe if this is where I'm like drawing a blank. I'm like, if we can't hear it, I don't understand. I'm like, Jacob's in the other room. I wonder if Jacob will come and help me, but this is teamwork at its finest. Thank you, Jacob. Uh-oh. Huh. Thank you for being patient while we navigate this video. Video setting. I'm seeing people say advanced settings, and that's where we're at. So send us the link to watch it on our own computers. We are all muted, says Eleni. These are great suggestions. Thank you. Let's see. I wonder if I do a new share screen. I'm gonna stop sharing. Yeah. Maybe just try sharing the video, the YouTube video screen. Yeah. Huzzah. You are sharing computer sound, but not computer video. That's fun. Thank you so much. Video? Maybe it just doesn't like us. Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, got it.
Woo! Thank you for your patience. Let's try this again. Can we hear? No, Feleni says no, can't hear still. Okay, well, that's fine. I will share the YouTube link in the chat right now. I don't expect you all to just watch this, but I do encourage you to watch it after the webinar. Essentially, even if I play it without sound, I can kind of elaborate. So what we have is an exercise with a school group of high schoolers. And in this exercise, the facilitator is going around and giving dots, putting dots on the foreheads of the students. And each dot has a color. And after everybody has a dot, the facilitator asks them to group themselves. That's the phrase, group themselves. So in silence. So everybody is kind of grouping themselves quietly, and there are two people who are not in a group. These two individuals, they're kind of, the facilitator is asking, how did they group them? How does it feel to be in a group? How does it feel to be out of the group? And as the students are sharing that they dislike, you know, that these two individuals were left out, they acknowledge that there wasn't really any invitations to invite them in. And then the two people excluded share that they feel bad that they weren't involved. Now the facilitator reveals that actually he never said for the groups to group themselves by color. That was just what happened because of the dots on their forehead. So really they could have grouped themselves however they wanted, but they chose, once the colors were on their forehead, to do it by color. And the takeaway is that, you know, because we naturally just group ourselves based off of what we see a lot of times, there's a chance that people get excluded, and the power of a first impression really comes through. So this time at the end, he's going to again say, group yourselves. And this time, friends immediately come and hug each other, and everybody just groups as one rather than separate colored groups. Thank you for listening to my version of that video. It ended up being pretty straightforward in the end. So let's try this one more time. Okay, actually, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I would like us to take a second to discuss whether or not we found that, or maybe just share if you found that exercise to be kind of insightful in some way. I'm seeing well narrated. Thank you, Lacey. Eleni found it valuable. Thank you. Yes, I am still figuring out how to teach implicit bias in a way that like makes sense. And then that video appeared and I was like, wow, so succinct, so easy to understand, that really even unintentionally, we are naturally going to just try to organize based off of what we see and what we notice. So with that said, the term implicit bias or unconscious bias is another way people phrase it. It describes when we have attitudes towards people or associate stereotypes with them without our conscious knowledge. And this has a huge impact in events. I can imagine you already are thinking about ways that implicit bias is going to affect decision-making and how we hire people and where we get our performers. But there's actually quite a few different types of biases. And these are just 4 that I think are relevant when it comes to events. Affinity bias is a feeling a connection to those similar to us. Perception bias are stereotypes and assumptions about different groups. Halo effect, projecting positive qualities onto people without actually knowing them. And confirmation bias, looking to confirm our own opinions and pre-existing ideas. I see a lot of these in events and hiring practices and work ethics, but in regards to events, I think that the goal of, you know, implicit bias wouldn't be to get rid of it. There's no way you can just, you know, completely get rid of people's biases, but instead to dispel negative assumptions and promote positive ones. Someone may be more biased towards your event if they see familiar representation on your flyer and within your team. Similar to that representation bias, you know, if you see things represented, you might feel more inclined to go to something. So implicit bias is not inherently a bad thing, but it does impact how we think, how we act, how we behave, how we think. So again, thinking about dispelling those negative ones and then promoting positive bias is going to actually help your event be more inclusive. So let's do a little case study. So these are some great flyers from MESO, and MESO is the Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon. Shout out to Liz Smith for being one of the speakers at this Elevating Small Business event that happened in May of 2022. These are two flyers from the exact same organization. And I think it's cool to see them side by side because they're two different approaches to promotional materials. What are your impressions from each flyer? And does this have anything to do with implicit bias? Feel free to comment in the chat if you have any observations. Nobody feels, maybe we're all just typing away. Excellent. Mackenzie says, love the beautiful flowers. Yes. Diversity in photos, says Liz. Yes. So maybe you could elaborate, Liz, on like what it means to have people in the photos versus the beautiful flowers, and if that impacted what you're drawn to, or what you can expect from this event.
Yes, I really love that they're not only representing different races, but different ages. I like that it's people helping each other. It just looks, you know, it just gives me that feeling of, oh, wow, they're going to really help me. We're here to help each other. It has a togetherness kind of feel about it. Whereas when I see the flowers, I don't get that warm, fuzzy feeling. I actually get a little bit confused about like what the flowers have anything to do with the title of it. So I love the one with the people. That just makes me want to join in.
Thank you. And it's funny that you identify with the one that you weren't speaking at, like, you know, fingers crossed that your next speaking event has maybe more inclusive pictures. But yes, I'm seeing more comments in the chat that one tries to represent lots of different types of people, but the other one doesn't seem to include any people. So maybe it's, again, maybe this is just more business, like it's really just down to the nitty gritty in the first flyer, and you're just going to be, but for me, I agree. I find that the second one is easier to read. That says Lacey, both visually and in terms of language. So it makes it easier for non-native English speakers. These are all really great points. They're really great things for, to reflect on, because these were done within a span of a month apart from each other, and we all had very similar reactions to the second flyer compared to the first. But Meso does a great job regardless, so I really do encourage you to, one, follow their Instagram. It's Meso PDX. And then they have plenty of free and accessible trainings and amazing workshops. So, oh, I see some more great comments. Before I move on, the one on the right has a call for action, which helps. Oh, yes. I'm like reading more thoroughly. Thank you. And then Lacey also says the second flyer also highlights the fact that it's free and makes that very visible. So again, like encouraging people from all socioeconomic backgrounds that they can register, but there's no price involved. So thank you for all of these great observations. This is my big takeaway. When it comes to inclusion, any effort is better than no effort. The biggest threat to inclusion is indifference. So what do I mean by that? Inclusivity can sometimes feel like a chore, and I am encouraging us to look at that thinking pattern and question how we can change it so that inclusivity is not an afterthought, it's not a chore, it's about effort and ways that we can build sustainable inclusive practices so that we can keep building on what we've done in the past and continuously grow. A lot of times inclusion, it makes people feel like it's more work, when in reality we've just been it's just been the norm for people to kind of do what's easiest, do what's convenient, and a lot of times that's already benefiting people at the top, people that already make plenty of money. So really these next things that I'm going to share are immediate ways that you can create inclusive practices that should, again, like be something you can build upon as opposed to just this one-time thing. First and foremost, probably the most important thing is to build inclusive resources into your budget. I would even create like a whole category for inclusivity resources, and then underneath create line items that help you think through every piece. A lot of times the suggestions I have are for in-person events, but I think that having ASL interpreters in a digital event space is equally important. And I've seen a lot of the city actually embrace ASL interpreters in their city council meetings and whatnot. But another thing to budget for are translations. You know, I'm not fluent in many different languages, so I would have to pay a translator to create a flyer in a different language or provide promotional materials in multiple languages. When it comes to disability advocacy, you know, having money for ramps or other safety things that can make your event space more accessible. It's easier to build that into the budget at the beginning than it is to add it at the end. And every choice to potentially not include these things is sending the message that either it's not a priority or, you know, that group is potentially excluded. And I think it's really important to think through what you add to your budget and what isn't there. So the second thing is introducing yourself with pronouns. Now, this is not me teaching you all about pronouns. I think that there's plenty of great resources out there talking about why pronouns matter and how they are used nowadays to make safer spaces for people that don't identify as a woman or a man. So introducing ourselves with pronouns by adding it to our email signature, putting it on name tags, what it does is that it tells people that it's okay to use whatever pronoun you feel best, and it doesn't put the pressure on people outside of the binary to have to say, oh, I'm so and so, I use they them pronouns. A lot of times it's being led by non-binary folks, and we can take that pressure off of that group by just normalizing the use of, hi, my name is Gabby, I use she her pronouns, I'm the events assistant. So learning how to be fluid with pronouns and making it a part of our normal introductions is one of the best ways you can make a space safer for trans and non-binary communities. Similarly, being very visible with your representation and who is welcome. So having signage at your events that all are welcomed can go pretty far when it comes to how your event feels to somebody. So if you're similar to the Meso case study, you know, having diversity on your promotional materials and even in your event space, you know, looking at your signage to see if there's ways to be more welcoming and inclusive are going to go very far when it comes to the physical feeling of safety at your events. You know, even saying what you will tolerate and what you won't tolerate in your space can make a huge impact. And then last but not least, welcoming feedback. I think we all are open to the idea of feedback, but I encourage you to think about how you want to receive that feedback while you're planning your event. Feedback is data. Feedback is something that you can analyze and study and engage with so that you can then create a different practice going forward. So something like an anonymous survey or feedback forms for the attendees and the staff, having that data is going to be essential for when you talk to partnerships and collaborators as well, especially if that's in your values as a business owner and if that's what you're promoting. If you're promoting inclusion in your event, it would be amazing to then have a piece of data that shows how diverse or how many people attended, that if that was one of your goals. So thinking about feedback as a trackable form of data rather than just, we had fun and it was a good event. Okay, we're flying through things, but hopefully this is all good information. Okay, so my last little piece of insights are these resources. Just a few of the amazing amount, there's an amazing amount of resources in Portland. That said, sometimes it's hard to find them. So Fingers Crossed Interpreting is the organization that I mentioned that provides ASL interpreters for events. They are a limited team of interpreters, so booking them in advance and helping and prioritizing ASL interpretation is going to be important. If you want to contact them, you just have to give them a date well in advance. But they're amazing, and they've been a huge advocate of making events inclusive for the deaf and hard of hearing community. So I really love seeing this group out and about in our community. Music Portland was a brand new organization that I wasn't aware of until this year, but it's been doing a lot of great work in Portland to, one, make music profitable and professional, but specifically they've just started working to try to connect diverse talent with event producers around town. They've created a program called Connects, and this is it's a way that you can submit what type of musician or what type of performer you ideally want at your event, and then the broker will kind of compile a list of artists for you, and then you will work to find the right fit. It guarantees musicians and performers a certain rate, so they're automatically going to get paid. I believe it's $75 for their first hour and then $50 going forward. But I think this is a great approach to the talent industry, and making sure that we're keeping it very diverse and very open to everybody. Steel Productions LLC is another new organization that actually started because there was an influx of trans and non-binary events happening around town, and they needed security for their events, but found that a lot of security management teams were often male-led and potentially not inclusive or understanding of LGBTQ events. So Steel Productions is a female, non-binary, and trans group that has a diverse number of staffers, but they work to create safe events and are kind of popping up because this was a need that wasn't being fulfilled within the security community. So really think that that's a really cool one to reach out to. They're pretty new, so you might have to build that relationship with them. But if you're looking for security at your next event that is going to be more mindful of different identities, this is an option. And if you're looking for vendors, or if you're looking for businesses to partner with, the Mercatus PDX has that directory. There's over 1,000 BIPOC owned businesses and entrepreneurs in Portland. So I really encourage you to access that directory when you're at a loss for, oh, I want to buy flowers, but I'm not quite certain, who in the area is going to have flowers that is a BIPOC owned business. So the other thing that I appreciate about the Mercatus PDX is that they are continuously looking at events and how they can get young, old, the different socioeconomic backgrounds. They throw events that are very good examples of inclusion. So even looking at like their promotional materials or checking out their website is great if you're kind of looking for another example of how you can do it better. And then last but not least is PDX free fridges. Now I included this because a lot of events have food, they involve some sort of food or drink. And a lot of times food waste is a huge problem with the events industry. We need to find a way to potentially help fight food insecurity, and PDX Free Fridges does just that. Throughout the town, there are pantries, which are for dry goods, and then fridges that are fully functioning, where you can package your food products that have been left over from your event and put them in the fridges for people that are houseless or hungry. And again, this is something that takes time. I mean, we shouldn't be just throwing garbage into the fridges, but, you know, packaged meals that are going to be, you know, fresh for people. But it's a great answer to the question of, well, what do I do with excess? We should be trying to think through every part of the event planning process. And this is a great solution to your food conundrum. Okay, so I am seeing the chat light up with a bunch of comments and additional resources. So I'm going to take a second just to read aloud some of the feedback I've gotten. It sounds like Liz saw Rent with 3 interpreters. So the Portland Center Stage, which has Rent going on for at least another month, I hope, is another group that you can, you know, see what they're doing right. They had an amazing diverse cast of Rent, which is predominantly, it's already a very diverse show, but to cast a wider range of actors and performers is really impressive. So they're doing something right. And Liz also says that the Music Portland is helpful. I'm glad that you are able to, yes, book BIPOC performers for your ongoing events. And then the Equitable Giving Circle is another great organization that helps with, that helps fight food waste, says Sarah. So these are all amazing. Oh, we even have more. The Urban Gleaners I had never heard of before. So Annette dropped a link in the chat for the Urban Gleaners. I'm going to stop our share, and all of these resources, my whole presentation will be sent to you via email in a YouTube link. So don't worry about memorizing anything. I can also hyperlink all of these organizations to make that information very accessible. But you know, we have about 15 minutes, and I wanted to leave a little bit of room to talk about things that I might not have mentioned, or if there's anything that you think has been left out of this inclusive discussion. I am not an expert by any means, so I really just invite people who have experience either putting on inclusive events, or maybe there's issues, things that they're still dwelling on, that they're like, how do I sensitively address this? I'm gonna open the floor for any questions or comments. Maybe I did a great job and everybody is just feeling really empowered. Okay.
I can add something.
Please, Nana.
I wanted to say, Gabby, awesome job with this entire presentation. Very, very great, very insightful. And I just wanted to just add to what you said about inclusivity. And one thing I can say is inclusivity is definitely not a box checker. So it does take intentionality and an open mind, you know, when you are engaging with people from different demographics and backgrounds, and just having an open mind. And again, just, you know, approaching it with a positive look and not as an opportunity. And so I just wanted to just add. And
thank you, Nana. Unfortunately, I feel like you were cutting in and out, and Nana's also in the office, so I was able to hear a lot of what she said, even if the recording was a little bit breaking up. But to Nana's point of intentionality, I think that's exactly what it is. It's that inclusivity is like a muscle. You got to practice, you got to work on it and build it up, because it's essentially not going to just grow overnight. But again, like, I think it comes back to that thing of indifference. Like, if you're not feeling excited about doing this work, then you'll put it off to the end, and that's not going to make for more inclusive events. So keep excited about these practices, see how you can change and grow, and share your successes with us. If there are things that you have ever, appear or think ideas that come to your mind, we can share with each other. And I think that's also huge. Liz says, love Airco. They do great work and also do workshops with Meso. Yes, Airco, who I don't know the breakdown of the letters exactly, but I do know that Airco works a lot with translations. So if you're somebody that is really concerned about making sure that you're not leaving Spanish-speaking families or Vietnamese families or whoever it is, when we say all families are invited, what does that actually mean? So thinking through too that translations is huge. Lacey just shared another one in the chat that's immigrant and refugee. Oh, this is the breakdown of the letters. Great. Thank you. Okay, any other last comments? Might get to end a little early today.
I just want to say, I noticed that Cultivate Initiatives is here, and not to put you guys on the spot, but you're a great organization yourselves. I had the opportunity to see what you do at All Saints down in Woodstock, and it's really fantastic. I don't know if that's putting you on the spot, Matthew, if you want to talk a little bit about what your organization does, but I know you're fabulous.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate it. Yeah, nice when you don't have to toot your own horn. Somebody does it for you. That's great. But yeah, we have a variety of resources. The one that Stephanie is referring to is through our community health initiative, which is our most public one, where we have about 5 spots per week that we bring our mobile shower and hygiene response team to, which brings free showers, clothing, hygiene products, along with nursing students from Concordia University, to provide services for anybody who needs it, but especially our neighbors who are experiencing houselessness. We're mainly in outer East Portland. Woodstock is about as far west as we go, but when thinking about event planning, kind of what caught my eye with this is we try to create events where people who are housed and unhoused can come together and try to create more of that community building and engagement. And so, if you ever want to talk through what that would look like, we're learning as well, but we've done it a little bit in the past. We have connections with, especially out here in East Portland, some of the unhoused communities. So yeah, feel free to be in touch. And we also have a workforce program and a housing and shelter program, but those are just a little bit more like the workforce. We're kind of at capacity, but we employ over 13 people and have 6 interns per day. And then going to be opening up a Safe Rest Village soon with the city of Portland. So more to come, but those are kind of the main things right there.
Wow. Thank you, Matthew and Stephanie, for shouting them out. That's amazing, just to know that you're not alone and that we can work together to find solutions that work for everybody. And I really am glad that this group of folks are kind of thinking about not just, like Nana said, checking an inclusive box or getting your equity, diversity training points. Instead, it's looking at long-term solutions. So really appreciate everybody's commitment to the cause. I think it's more sustainable this way. If people are included, there's more voices, better insights, more people to buy things if you want to have a profitable event. So again, like it's a good thing to think about as a core to your event or to your organization. But Matthew, there was a request. Yes, Sarah, please do.
Actually talking about how it shouldn't just be a box that gets checked. I had an experience with the cultural initiatives that was I met them at an event in Gateway, and it was so amazing and awesome to have them there. But the people who invited them didn't make sure that there was proper drainage so that the showers could be used. And so the shower truck just sat there and used the whole day. And they still got to talk with people and talk about the good work that they do. But that sort of felt like an example of, you know, let's bring in these people who do good work, but then don't have the infrastructure to support the good work they're trying to do. And I think that that's a common oversight and not a judgment, but just something to be aware of when you're planning your events.
Thank you, Sarah. What a great piece of, or a great insight, because again, to her point, if you're lucky enough to get partnership and collaboration with diverse organizations or people dedicated to being more inclusive, set them up for success. It's important that their reputation is highlighted, and obviously, you know, mistakes are made and things can always be improved, but I just really think that that's a great thing to add, is that, you know, it's all about the overall impression too, and how you set people up. So this has been so helpful. Thank you all for sharing. Unless anybody has any other great examples or other things that they felt were necessary to this conversation, feel free to take a second to share. Otherwise, I'm going to let you go with a couple extra minutes to spare. Thank you, Lacey, for your support, and everybody who has cheered me on during this webinar throughout the technical difficulties. I really appreciate all of it, and I welcome feedback. So if you'd like to anonymously tell me something, or feel free to send it to Mackenzie if that's even easier. So thank you. I appreciate everybody. Thanks so much.